Welcome to Amazing Business Radio with best-selling author and customer service and business expert, Shep Hyken. Shep will talk with some of the smartest thinkers in business to help make you more successful in your professional and personal life. This is Amazing Business Radio with Shep Hyken.
Hello, everybody. It's Shep Hyken here. We're back with another episode of Amazing Business Radio, and today we're talking with Eric D. Stone, who started his career right out of college at Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Started working in a branch, worked his way up to manager, and spent, 26 years there. And then he branched out on his own. He's just written in the last year or so a great book, Jumpstart Your Workplace Culture. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, how what's happening on the inside is felt on the outside by customers. Before we get into that, a quick announcement. If you've got an amazing story that you want to share or a question that you have, obviously about customer service and experience, please reach out to me at any of the social channels that you might be on. By the way, if it is a question, use the hashtag AskShep. I'll answer the question right there in the social channel on this show, or perhaps in my newsletter, the Shepherd Letter, and you can subscribe at no charge to the Shepherd Letter by just going to my website, www.hyken.com, and you can subscribe. And while you're there, check out our annual customer service and experience research. It is free. Just click on the link and you download it instantly. You don't even have to give me your email address to do that. All right, so let's jump into our interview with Eric today. Eric, welcome to the show.
Shep, it is great to be part of this opportunity. Really looking forward to it.
Well, I'm excited. I know your book's been out for a while, Jumpstart Your Workplace Culture. First of all, what grabbed me was the word culture. And that is because as I talk to my clients about customer service and experience, they're looking for a lot of tactics and ideas and things that will move them forward. But I say, you know what, customer service experience, it's not really a department. It's not so much a strategy. It's a philosophy, and it needs to be ingrained in the culture, which is why we're talking today about how to create that culture that's focused on an amazing experience. So right off the top, let's do a quick summary. I know you now are consulting and working, speaking, etc., writing books. Prior to that, you work with one of my favorite companies of all time, and that is Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Eric, give us a quick little background. You probably started in a branch, but you worked your way up to running the entire territory.
So yeah. Well, one of four. I was management trainee in Massachusetts, learning the ins and outs of customer service sales.
Right out of college?
Right out of college.
Right. They are the best at recruiting great people right out of college.
My first job. I mean, since the Boston Red Sox weren't hiring at that time, because I love sports, jokingly, I ran into Enterprise. Really lucky, really fortunate. One of four in a location, learned the ins and outs. The fast forward version is moved up throughout the company to eventually lead a few different regions as a regional vice president or officer of the company, the Southern New England region, having an opportunity to learn from the past, really learn from what was great or what was not great. And I'd say most of my important messages were the things I might not have received, and trying to say someday when I have a chance to lead a few hundred employees, I want to be able to try to do this. And I was fortunate to climb into that ladder. We were one of the more successful, they call it the rankings that you'd get in any organization. And we were fortunate to lead not only with profits, but with a balance of employee development, customer satisfaction, and all those important things. And the funny thing is, when I retired, my son has taken over the reins, and he is now a branch manager of that company in my old region. So it's kind of funny.
I love that. And again, there's a sweet, near dear place in my heart for Enterprise for a couple of reasons. I did not tell you this, Eric, but I started my business in 1983, and I signed a couple of contracts to do speeches. My very first contract, by the way, was with Anheuser-Busch to do a meeting for them. And we called it Back to Basics. I talked about creating a moment of magic, avoiding moments of misery. And then I got a call from somebody at Enterprise, and I came in and I auditioned. We talked about some of the few folks that were back there in the day, and they said, "You're hired." And I went to 8 different branches, and I did a speech at each branch. And that, by the way, even though it was a second contract, was the first speech date I ever did. That was back in 1983, 42 years ago. I had a lot of hair back then. Well, actually, not all that much hair, just looked like it because I had what I had. In high
Right.
school, I was voted most likely to recede. And you could tell back then. Anyway, I love the company, still occasionally do work with the company. And what was fun is on my 10-year anniversary, I actually came back and instead of doing 8 branches that were fairly close together, we now had like 400 or 500 people in the audience from branches all over. And then of course, the company's now worldwide and it's incredible. Anyway, I can go on and gush about enterprise, but I want to gush over your book, Jumpstart Your Workplace Culture. You talk about creating wow moments across an entire organization. And I would imagine those wow moments also cross over into customers. Let's talk about that. And I want your definition of wow.
Well, let me give you I'm going to give you the abridged story of Johnny the Bagger, which in my opinion is a wow moment. This is it's a young man who has Down syndrome and he's a bagger at a grocery store chain who's trying to change the customer experience and memories and loyalty within the organization there. And on his own, he takes it on his own initiative and creates a little message every time he's bagging the groceries. That one little message was a thought of the day that he'd give to you, Shep, as he's bagging your groceries.
So he
That
would
message,
type this up or handwrite it out, or what would
he
he?
hand
Yeah.
wrote a little note and he gave it to the customers as they would get checked out. Interestingly enough, everyone's trying to go behind Johnny's line because it's so inspiring and they love that little thought of the day. It becomes so contagious. The floral department picks up on Johnny's above and beyond, you might call it. It wasn't in his job description to do this. And then the floral department takes broken flowers, unused corsages, and now walks around the store, pins it on a young adult, or I should say young child, elderly individual, transforming this organization and creating something, I guess, well, what's a wow moment? It's unexpected. It's something that wasn't expected on me. And it creates a pause, almost a little bit of a surprise. Now, the key though, Shep, with all of these things is how do you take that and embed it through your entire organization so it is not a one-off or a two-off. And that's where organizations, and I've worked with, will take that story, they put it in their new hire training to show what a behavior looks like, ownership mentality within an organization. Is Johnny's what he did? And then you tuck it into training classes throughout the timeline of an employee. You then put it into an employee review that, Shep, are you living the Johnny the Bagger mentality? But you don't stop there. You create initiatives that support a story about how do we recognize people who are Johnny the Baggers, and you encourage it. It lives the founding values of any company. It's not just listed, it's lived. And that's how you slowly tuck it in. And now everybody from new hire to retire understands what above and beyond or a wow moment or ownership mentality looks like.
So I'm by the way, there's so much I want to unpack there, but I want to go back to what you described as a wow moment.
Yeah.
You did use the words above and beyond, okay, but not to describe what wow was. You separated those two out. And I think it's important to understand that most people think that wow is over the top, blow me away, above and beyond. No, you said wow was a surprise. That's the word you use. Are you going to stand by that definition?
It is, well, I think you're kind of nailing what's important because you got to be careful when you use the term above and beyond. An employee could get the wrong impression and think I have to stay till midnight, and that's above and beyond.
Exactly. And every moment, every interaction has to be an above and beyond interaction.
Yeah, and we were trying to encourage those little nuggets, those little things that make the experience special. It
Yep.
could be as innocent as a note that was written. It's that simple.
Yep.
Doesn't have to be hard.
Good. I'm loving that because so many people, when they use the word, let's create the wow experience, I tell them you can't do that every time. It's impossible. Somebody's going to call, just have a simple question. And the fact that you answered it quickly and were nice about it is enough to make them say, I love doing business with these people. They're always so friendly, knowledgeable, helpful. They get back to me quickly. And that's what it takes. To me, that is a wow organization, not a wow moment. So this whole Johnny the Bagger thing, which is a story that's been around for a while, and it's a great one. He took it upon himself to handwrite these little notes when he was off duty and came back on, and people loved it. So this is where I get excited about what you just said. If somebody writes a note to a company and says, I am unhappy about something, Eric, I'll ask you. It's a rhetorical question, but I'm going to ask you. What do most companies do with that information?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, it depends what kind of organization it is. But
Assuming they are the kind of organization that would act on the feedback of a negative comment from a customer.
well, they would communicate that to all the parties that be, so it's a
Yeah.
learning, coachable moment.
Yeah, and they would try to figure out ways to avoid it from happening again. And if it was a one-off, it's a one-off. But if they see something happen, they try to mitigate it or eliminate it. And that's what most good companies do. But there's another thing companies can do that many of them don't, and that is they get a positive feedback note or just a positive comment from a customer. And I'm sure one day somebody walked up to the manager of that grocery store and said, "Do you know this guy, Johnny? Do you know what he gives me every day? I love coming here. Do you know why there's a long line behind him?" And of course, by that time, I'm sure management figured it out. But when it first started, it was a surprise to both customers and management. And this positive feedback from the customer. My question is, how many companies actually take a note that somebody, takes the time to write to saying, "Hey, I just wanted you to know about Eric. He's great." How many companies do the same debrief that they do for the negative with the positive, and then try to operationalize the positive?
Yeah, no, and I think the one thing I know that the really good leaders will do is they're going to take that message, whether it's email or whatever channels they do, and they're going to say, "Hey, I want to give a shout out to Tommy who was able to." And for the negative, I think you do have to be a little mindful of what you do with it. Where are you putting it? And for me, we would always track those moments of opportunity. And when we saw the trend as leadership, it was our job to circle back, bring the team together, and identify it before it becomes too much of a pattern. That's why some of these organizations must have these weekly settings, especially those brick and mortar kind of Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks, and enterprise hospitality, where you have a chance to recognize some of these opportunities and or celebrate some of these really inspiring stories. You must have touch points along the way.
Yep. And the celebration is extremely important. But taking the positive and saying, okay, how can we make it so every customer might be willing to write a note like this? So, and the grocery store did it. They started saying, "Hey, look what Johnny did. Let's do little things like the floral department, taking the flowers they can't sell, but are still good and to be used a certain way. They just can't put them in a big bouquet if they're broken or whatever. But they can take the individual flower and, like you said, pin it to the lapel of somebody or give it to a child. It's great. Hey, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk about the link between the employee experience, which is really deeply and it's written about in your book, and of course the customer experience. I believe what's happening on the inside is felt on the outside. And your book is a great way of sharing insights and information on how to make that happen. So we are talking with Eric Stone, author of Jumpstart Your Workplace Culture. This is Amazing Business Radio. Don't go away. We're coming right back. Shep Hyken here with an offer that won't cost you a cent. You may have heard me talk about my annual customer service and experience research. We've surveyed thousands of customers matching the U.S. Census for age, gender, ethnicity, and geography. And we find out what customers love, hate, and want in a customer experience. What's the number one customer experience that almost every customer desires? What makes them come back? What makes them leave? Why won't they fill out surveys? What do they think of AI? Well, these questions and more are answered in the research. You can download the full report by going to hyken.com and clicking on the research tab at the top. Like I said, it won't cost you a cent, but it may make you or save you thousands and thousands of dollars when you understand your customers' expectations. Again, the website is www.hyken.com.
You're listening to Amazing Business Radio with best-selling author and customer service and business expert, Shep Hyken.
We're back on Amazing Business Radio talking with Eric D. Stone, the author of Jumpstart Your Workplace Culture, and he is also the founder of a company. I want to make sure I get this right, Clear Path Ventures, which is what you started right after you left Enterprise. And I know you used the word retired from Enterprise, but you're not old enough to retire. But you were there for a long, long time.
I was there almost 30 years
Yep.
and it's funny when I quote unquote retired and transitioned, I would get a lot of calls from friends, colleagues, former employees, associates, board members, and they kept asking me questions. And I said, well, I can give some free advice, but if I'm going to keep giving advice, maybe I should actually charge every once in a while. I might get less people calling for free advice. Jokingly aside,
It
clear
works.
path was always a way that I believed when I would meet with a young manager, maybe, or a tenured manager. And I wanted to simplify things for them. And I felt listen, life's not a clear path, but there's usually a few key things you can do to create this clear path. And so I said, wow, that's a nice, catchy thing.
Yeah, that's great. All right. I promised before the break that we're going to talk about the link between the employee experience and the customer experience. So I've got your 5 key factors in front of me, but I'm going to let you kind of walk us through those
Yeah.
straight out of the book.
Great. Well, so this philosophy that is so important. It's the simplest thing I tell organizations to build upon. First factor of this engagement that relates to employee and customer is just having a simple, strong relationship with your manager. But what does that mean? How do you create a listen, observe, and learn environment throughout your entire organization from the hiring process? Fast, it's got to be efficient. 11 nieces and nephews, 3 kids, all in the workplace. I hear stories and nightmares about this part. But can you make it special? Can you make it fast, efficient? Can you have 3 people call Shep and say, welcome to the team, Shep? Can you have an onboarding that's just on point? Can you have initiatives that support relationship building? And when you do that, and when you create relationships and you're encouraging it with the employees, of course, it's going to transition over to that well, I should say the customer experience. It is going to be the brick and mortar of building trust and loyalty, which is what everything is about. Connection matters, strong relationships for both sides. Simple to say, harder to build. But that's the first simple one.
And then you've got clear expectations.
Clear goals and expectations. Shep, you'd be shocked, or maybe you wouldn't be shocked, but less than 60% of employees are aware of what is expected. Could you only imagine if that was on the customer side? Maybe it is. I don't know. I don't have that stat. But great organizations find a way to do 3 things great. They find a way to amplify the message with their team, their employees. They find a way to buffer it, condense it, keep it simple, and they find a way, when do I convey? And it becomes, what I write about is they're great at being the distraction catcher. When there's less distractions, the employees can really execute what's expected of them. And that transitions, of course, to the customer side. We want a nice, consistent experience that the customer will get throughout, whether it's the experience from online to the customer call center to the brick and mortar entry. Wherever along that journey is, it's clearly communicated of the goals and expectations.
Yep.
The third is right material, equipment, and information in order to
Right.
achieve the desired outcome. And we can go, I don't know how in depth you want to go with each one, but
Well, I mean, the show is the show. We only have so much time.
yeah, let's pause there.
Yeah.
Let me give you one other quick one.
No, don't pause. I want to go through all 5. The right tools. I think that's important.
So when you look at, I don't think people show up to work and want to be terrible at what they do. I truly don't believe that's what they're out there for.
You don't think? There are a few employees that no, I'm just kidding.
Well, there are a couple, but not the majority. And so, what are you doing to create this continuous learning cycle? Remember, for each of these factors, I challenge everyone to have 3 initiatives that are tucked into your organization. From whether it's great organizations are good at needs assessments on their training material. The first thing I say is, does your training encourage the 3 to 5 key initiatives that you have within your organization? Do they align? Do they allow people to be at their best? Is it continued? Is there on the job? Is there show, observe, and shape mentality where Shep, I'm watching you do it and coaching you along the way? Matter of fact, you might watch me do it first. I'm going to show you first on a sales call, an interview, whatever that may be. Then I'm going to watch you do it, observe, and shape until someday you're going to show somebody else. And when you do that really well, you allow it to hit to the customer side. Innovation starts. All of these, by having the right material, equipment, and information, I can be innovative. I can be fast and efficient. And so those are important. Fourth one,
The opportunities. Yep.
personal, professional growth. What does the organization do to promote me growing personally and professionally? I use the simplest analogy is, You have a meeting, and Shep, at the end of your meeting, you bring in a guru of finance. We all know there's a lot of anxiety in the world today. Financial situations matter. And let's give 15 minutes at the end to have a financial planner come in and just give me some great insights of what I can do at home, not at work necessarily, but at home to be great. They do personally and professional constant development. And then the last one is simple enough. It is rewarding top performance. You've got to find out within your organization, step one, what am I recognizing and rewarding? So always recognize effort, reward excellence. That's step number one. And then number two, I don't need 17 rewards and I don't need just two. You need to do the Goldilocks version and find just right. Make sure they are diversified, though, Shep. Don't just have all about service, have sales, have whatever else you're trying to push through your organization. And I got to share one quick story. I was at a hotel checking in. I win for whatever reason. I am the customer of the day, by the way. So this kind of shares into, and I'm like, wow, that's pretty neat. I get a bag of chips. I get some, I got a journal I get right into. I go up. The next day I go down and I say, hey, that's really cool that you recognize me. I don't know what I did, but hey, I'm trying to eat healthier. Can I take this bag of Cheetos? Can I get an apple instead? True story. They go to me, and here's where you got to be careful. They go, "Oh, Mr. Stone, those chips expired yesterday. I can't trade anything in." And so now I had this moment of excellence to only uncover and open the hood to find out they're about to go stale. Be careful of what you're communicating. Goes up a few of those factors, but
Oh
it was
my
a funny
gosh.
story. Yeah,
I
pretty,
would
pretty.
have simply said, you can keep the chips. Here's an apple.
Yep. Yeah. Oh boy, it was funny.
That is like somebody, wow. Maybe we also should train our employees on what not to say. Uh, and by the way, the date on these chips, they weren't going to go stale that day. They just were best if used by.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and Shep, you
Twinkies
just
have
demonstrate.
an expiration date, but you can still stick them in your down below where you're bunkered up for 25 years, still tastes just fine.
Yeah. Right. Right. Well, word choice matters.
Yep. All right. We're kind of winding down here, and normally I ask for one thing, but I'm actually I don't know what you were going, and I warned you the question would be coming. What I'd like to do is I I want you to the most important question. I want you to save that for your one thing. You have a question that you can ask your customers, and I just want to wait for that moment. But what I want to jump to in the list of different topics is the customer is always right. You know, if that's the case, then is the employee always wrong when the customer is wrong, but you're supposed to make them feel like they're right? How does that work? Because that I have a philosophy on that, but I can't wait to hear yours.
Yeah, it's one of those things it's this careful dance you have to have. So, I'm blatant and would always do it at training. The customer is not always right. We already know the customers can be unreasonable, unrealistic, challenging, demanding. But, and there's the but, they just have to feel that they're being treated fairly and that
With
they can get
respect
the
and dignity.
yeah, because they're not always right. We know some of them, let's have fun with it. They're crazy. They're absolutely crazy sometimes, and their demands are unrealistic. But how we, are sympathetic, empathetic, and can really truly understand to then guide them along the way. So yeah, the customer, and here's the other thing, Shep. So when I used to get a really surprising customer alert, if I go to my employee right away and I'm just like, Shep, what's going on? How did this happen? What did you do? This isn't right. Me as the employee, I'm always like, oh my God, you didn't even hear what they said to me, what they demeaned me, they called me this, they did that, I was here. So my question, because that creates frustration, anxiety, stress of the employee. So when I would get a concern, I would always say, Shep, I wanted to just take a minute to talk about Mr. Stone. What was your thought process that went behind whatever? Because I wanted to understand before the employee got frustrated, there might have been absolute logic of what they did.
Right.
And it was important. I said, you know what, Shep? I got to be honest. I would have done one thing different.
Yep.
It's so empowering and enlightening for the employee not to just get battered and abused all the time and feel like a pincushion, is to be heard and understood. So,
Yeah, I tell a story about how I checked into a hotel up in Toronto, and got in very late that night, and there was one person behind the front desk. By the way, she didn't offer me a bag of chips, but she was obviously new, and it turns out that this was the first night she was left alone. And I came in, reservation, and she didn't have the reservation. And underneath her breath, I kept hearing her say, "The customer's always right. The customer's always right." She kept saying that. And I said, "Hold on, let's figure this out. You don't have my reservation, but I've got a confirmation." And she's looking at it and she goes, "Oh my gosh, Mr. Hyken, you're at the wrong hotel. Same brand name, but you're down the street." And she arranged for the bellman to take me down the street. But she was so concerned that her boss was going to be upset because she knew that I was wrong. So it's a great little experience. But I do believe my phrase is, the customer is not always right, but they're always the customer. Let them be wrong with dignity and respect. However, there are people that you can fire as customers. And if they're abusive, they're saying the wrong things, you can give them a chance to fix it. But if they aren't willing to do it, it's like, you know what? I would love to introduce you to somebody that might be better off taking care of you, and send them down the street. If this was an enterprise customer, send them down to Budget, Avis. So they might have the kind of person you want to talk to. Now, I don't know.
And Shep, that goes so far with that employee.
Oh, yeah.
It goes so far with that employee.
And it's viral internally because they know the manager's not going to come on them and just say, "Hey, what's going on?" Yelling, "This person's upset," making the assumption that the employee made the mistake. All right. We are down to the final question. It's the one thing question, but I already know what I want you to do. I want you to tell us about your one question. How's that for a little segue?
So I want to make sure I'm following your lead here. The one question I'd like people to challenge themselves with, or something about the book, or something about
This is the most
life.
important question you can ask your customer.
Oh, there you go. I love it. So I would say, and this is really, really important, because this goes from generic to genuine.
Well, you did put in front of important the word most.
Yeah. Did we live up to our promise? Is one of my favorite. If I had to pick one, that's the question that I love.
Yeah.
Did we live up to our promise? Because people can get confused with a few things. There's these two circles. One is the delivery mechanism, and one is the customer's expectation, and they have to align perfectly, and that's where everything works out. Our employees sometimes confuse effort with execution, but that question is the one I love.
Yep. And it's a great question. And first of all, we need to make that commitment to our customer, and we need to make sure they know what that commitment is, because that may be part of what gives them a reason to come to this company versus another company. So when they understand the commitment, and then when you do live up to it and it's consistent, every time they come back, they get the similar experience living up to that commitment, then it's predictable. And customers love predictability. And that leads to trust. Trust raises confidence. And that means they come back and become not just repeat customers, but ideally loyal customers. So great question. And it sets up so much of an opportunity. Eric, thank you so much for being on the show. This is why we call it Amazing Business Radio, because you've given us a lot of amazing information, starting with your definition of wow, how it ties to operationalizing the story of Johnny the Bagger, to those 5 key factors of employee engagement. And of course, we talked about, the employee experience, the customer experience, closing out with that most important question. Powerful, powerful information, Eric. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
I did too. Thank you. Well, everybody, that wraps it up. Another episode of Amazing Business Radio. We will be back next week with another interview. Until that time, this is Shep Hyken reminding you to always be amazing.